There are many ways to obtain a second residence permit to be able to live in another country and potentially to be able to call that country your tax home to legally reduce your taxes. But if you're an entrepreneur, you may not have considered that by simply forming a company in another country, you can actually start yourself on the path to second residence. Today, I'm going to share with you 3 tax-free countries where you can do exactly that. Hi, I'm Andrew Henderson. I'm the author of the book Nomad Capitalist and the founder of the company Nomad Capitalist, where we help 7- and 8-figure entrepreneurs and investors legally go where you're treated best. And you can learn more at nomadcapitalist.com. Now, one of the things I've talked about, if you want to legally reduce your taxes, is you have to follow my tax-free or tax-friendly quadrant. On one side of the quadrant is you. Where are you leaving and where are you arriving? On the other side is where is your business leaving? Where is your business arriving? And you have to satisfy all 4 of those parts of the quadrant. You can't simply move your company offshore while you're staying in a high-tax country. There are lots of different rules that prevent you from doing that in most cases. Meanwhile, simply moving overseas yourself may not make your tax situation any better or as good as it could be. And so what you want to consider when you're moving your business offshore is, of course, not only how to move it offshore, but elements are involved, employees, manufacturing, all that kind of stuff. But once you figure that out, where are you going to incorporate? And one thing that I think can simplify your life if you want to have everything in one place is finding a place to incorporate that solves your business tax problems, allows you to solve your personal tax problems, and just wraps everything up with a nice little bow. Now, the old school idea of flag theory, which we talk about and practice here, is that you want to have each part of your life and each part of your business in a different jurisdiction. So you live in one jurisdiction which doesn't tax you personally, your company's in a different tax-free jurisdiction, that company banks in a different jurisdiction entirely, your citizenship is from somewhere different entirely. However, some people say, I just want one clean package. And so I'm going to share with you 3 tax-free countries that allow you to do that pretty simply. Now, there are a lot of kind of cobbled together strategies. For example, someone wants to ask me, if I get Antigua citizenship by investment, that country has no personal income tax, then I can live there and I can start a company and that could theoretically be tax-free. And so that can get a little bit confusing. And in fact, Antigua actually has a corporate income tax. And so that's not a one-stop solution. There are other solutions like Hong Kong, which people have historically used, which has a corporate tax rate, which can theoretically be avoided by not doing certain things or hiring the wrong people or making sure you file your audits on time. But once you get a residence permit in Hong Kong and a Hong Kong ID, generally those offshore tax exclusions are going to go away. And so Hong Kong can be good if you're offshore. It may not be as good if you are onshore. It becomes a low tax jurisdiction. So let's talk about the 3 places where you can go and get set up out of the box. And the first one is the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. Definitely one that I see growing in popularity right now. Number one, you can set up a lot of different types of businesses there that may not be able to be set up in some traditional tax havens. Number 2, you get access to an actual residence permit where you can go and live there. And so the UAE, people are often quick to point out, does have a VAT, it does have a value-added tax if you buy something at a store, but there is no personal or corporate income tax. And you can go and set up your company. What a lot of people do is set up in a free zone. There are different free zones all over. So whether it's one of the more expensive ones like the Dubai International Financial Center or one of the cheaper ones such as Ajman, or you may have heard of Ras Al Khaimah or others. You can set your business up there and basically get an all-in-one solution where if you become a resident of the country, which you can do by having your company, you set it up, you pay the licensing fee, and then you can go and apply for a 3-year residence permit. Once you do that, once you have the residence permit, you can then take your Emirates ID and you can apply for a bank account. There are certain things that you need to do because banks are going to be a bit more leery of especially free zones. So you want to prove what your business is all about. And then you can go out and actually hire people. And so for a business like ours that's becoming more international, we wanted to attract talent from around the world as we're increasingly hiring people with a lot of tax experience and strategy experience and just all kinds of upper management in our company. We wanted to be able to attract people from all over the world. And so Dubai and the UAE in general is great in that we can go and hire people who are already in the UAE, or we can go and get them visas and bring them into the UAE by building out a visa package. And so you can get a visa just for yourself, and then you can add your spouse, but you can also add employees, and so you can build that out depending on the free zone that you're in. And so if you're going to live in the UAE for about 6 months a year, if your company is based there, and if your residence is there, then your banking is there, you've kind of got an all-in-one solution where it can be your residence, it can be your tax home, it can be your business home, and you can do that all pretty efficiently. Now, there are still some rules, as with many of these companies, as to who you're going to sell to and where you do business. You want to make sure that you follow the rules of the country as well as of the particular free zone or whatever the kind of corporate structure that you've set up. But there's a lot of flexibility in that, and if you like the idea of the cosmopolitan vibes of Dubai, it's certainly not a cheap place to live. Certainly there are some things that you want to think about, but it's a great place in that it's centrally located. You've got a lot of benefits of setting your company up in the UAE, and so that's an entirely tax-free solution for most people if you do it properly. Now, the second option, if you prefer more of the sandy beaches, is to set up in the Cayman Islands. They've got a similar situation where you can set up in their enterprise city. They've got free zones, and you've got basically a free zone company that you can set up in. And again, you can actually bring some people with you to do your business in the Caymans. And by setting that business up, you can then go and you can apply for immigration status. Now, the UAE has started making moves towards saying, okay, some people who are highly qualified, eventually maybe they can work towards citizenship. The talk has been, hey, we don't want to allow dual citizenship. We still want you to learn Arabic. So that became something that probably most people wouldn't want to take part in if you're especially coming from a Western country. UAE passport is a pretty good passport these days by all comparisons, but just probably not something that the average person wants. The Cayman Islands does have its own passport. It's part of a more complicated British regime. Also going to be a more difficult one to get, but what you can enjoy while you are in the Cayman Islands is the zero tax treatment and a culture where people, I think, pretty generally are opposed to forms of direct taxation. And they're not in a hurry to go out and institute new kinds of taxes. They get all those things paid from things like ships coming in or whatever that is. And so you can set up your company, you can then get your residence permit, and you can then live in the Cayman Islands and run the company from there. One of the things I like about these options is that as there is increasing talk about taxing companies and economic substance and global minimum tax, we don't know how all this is going to play out, especially for smaller companies, which haven't really been the target entirely yet. But I think the idea of running your company and being physically present and being able to bring some managers and some people who are running it with you, partners, what have you, into the jurisdiction itself is going to be more important in the years going forward. And so having that option, even if you don't use it, is probably a good thing. Now, the other reason you might want to have a Cayman Islands company is that Cayman Islands banks, whether it's for personal or business, are notoriously at this point rather leery towards someone who does not have a presence in the Cayman Islands. Now, there's always the possibility you could bring in some obscene amount of money, which they're willing to do their due diligence and get comfortable with you. But for the average person, if you want to bank in the Cayman Islands, either for your company, you're going to want to have that presence of being a resident there. If you want to bank personally there, and that's your safe haven, you're going to also want to have some connections there. So it's an all-in-one solution for people who want access to the wealth haven that is the Cayman Islands, who want to incorporate their company, and be able to live in a place that, again, not cheap by any means, but a place where you can actually just go and set up everything in one place and get everything in one package. So the third tax-free country that you can use is a little bit further afield, and that is Vanuatu in the South Pacific. Now, Vanuatu has historically had very liberal tax rules, so liberal, in fact, that it has earned a bit of a lesser reputation. So depending on how you're doing business and where you're doing business, this may be a less desirable place to go. However, Vanuatu, no personal income tax, no corporate income tax. You can set up a company there. You can bank there. Certainly, you're going to have probably a lesser banking experience and more difficulty in getting your money, potentially even higher fees than you would have in the UAE or the Cayman Islands. This is definitely a place for someone who is starting a smaller business, starting a more regionalized business, or who's willing to open bank accounts in other places around the world, potentially with larger amounts of money. But if you want to live somewhere that's a bit further afield, then Vanuatu offers the potential to do that. And so you do need to prove some kind of income, put a little bit of money in the bank in Vanuatu alongside your residence application, or you can go the citizenship by investment route. Vanuatu doesn't really have my favorite CBI program in that there are some discrepancies in how the multiple citizenship by investment programs over the years have been run. So I'm not a huge fan of their program as much as I have been there. I would really like it to be a great program. It's not quite where I want it to be yet, but it could be an option. Is an option to at least live in Vanuatu or take the cheaper option of residence. Combine that with a Vanuatu company. It is, again, certainly a less desirable option than the first two, but it gives you an idea of the difference of the very cosmopolitan Dubai and the Cayman Islands and the much more emerging and laid-back Vanuatu in the South Pacific, particularly if you need proximity to places like Australia and New Zealand, which right about now probably less interesting given everything happening in the world. So those are 3 tax-free jurisdictions where you can tie everything up in one place. Are there other jurisdictions where you can live and pay no taxes? There are dozens of different situations and thousands of different permutations where you can live and, again, play the game of planting flags in different places. But for the answer to where do I go and put everything in one box, those are 3 of the first. Don't stop now. We've got well over 1,000 more videos here on YouTube for you to watch and learn how to go where you're treated best. And if you want to work with Nomad Capitalist personally, go to nomadcapitalist.com/apply, learn about our unique, tried and true process, garnered over years of experience, and learn how you can become our client.